Hello everyone, we're going to do a plot diagram or a plot chart, which just means plot. The word plot just means the events of the story. So we're basically going to outline the events of the story from beginning to end. Basically from the beginning and the least intense moments to the most intense moments, and then how that story is resolved. So we're doing My Mother's Garden today. You should have already done Fish Cheeks at this point. And so here you're going to have the opportunity as we go through the video to pause, put some notes down, jot some notes down, and then check your answers against mine. Okay? So anytime I tell you to pause the video, you just need to click pause and you will copy anything down that is in red on the screen in that moment. So here we go. The first thing you're going to do is copy down the title and the author under this box right here that says plot. So go ahead, pause the video, do title and author. Pause now. Okay, you're back. And we're going to start with the exposition. Find the box that says exposition. Now, in order to help guide you through this plot chart, it's going to help you to have your My Mother's Garden text out, to look at any of your annotations, to reread certain parts of the text. That will help you fill in these answers. So, exposition just basically means the introduction of the story, how the story's starting off. What we learned basically at the beginning, it just gives us an overview of the text. So I want you to pause the video after I get done with this little segment, and you're going to write down the setting, where and when does the story take place. There's a specific date I want you to find, and then think about all the different settings that happen in the story, because there's multiple ones. The situation. What's the situation for Caitlin and her mother? How did they get in this situation of living in poverty? And then the characters. Who do we know throughout the story? It doesn't have to just be at the beginning, but throughout the story, who is involved? Pause the video now and answer those 3 questions using your text. All right, welcome back. First setting, the places you could have written down might have been garden, housing project, prep school. You might have written down 1990s, because that was the date that it was included in the setting. The situation, Caitlin's parents divorced and now they're living in poverty. Caitlin's mom plants a garden after it becomes popular, and she is made to get rid of it. So that's basically the situation people find themselves in. And then the characters. So there were multiple characters including Caitlin, her mom, the neighborhood kids that help her mom with the garden, the students at Caitlin's school, and the housing authority agent. So after we've done exposition and we've got a good idea of the situation, we're going to move into the conflict. Now, it's hard to understand the conflict without understanding the protagonist and the antagonist in the text. So I want you to write down who you think this text is having a conflict between. So obviously, Caitlin is Greenidge, the narrator, is our protagonist, the person that we're rooting for. That's what protagonist means. Who's the antagonist? Who's the person that is against her, or the thing that is against her, or is she against herself? I want you to pause and write down what you think. All right, so yesterday in Miss Lee's class, I had a couple different ideas for protagonist versus antagonist, and I'm going to talk about one specifically in this video, and I'm going to let you choose which one you want to do. So we talked about how it's Caitlin herself versus society, and the students who came up with society said, you know, she's against the stereotype of the welfare queen, which is what a lot of people in society were thinking. She's against the way that people treat people in poverty and housing projects, and so that she is definitely in conflict with some of society. Now, other people kind of said that Caitlin is it's more of an internal conflict, because these people really aren't fighting her necessarily, and and everything that she's feeling is very internal because she doesn't really express it. So you can do either one. If you want to do person versus self, if you want to do person versus society, either one works. And then we're thinking about, as we get into the conflict, Caitlin is struggling with the changes in her life and the people she goes to school with. So that's basically society, or that's also kind of the internal struggle of the changes in her life. So pause the video now, and you should write down everything else that we've added and read at this point. Go. All right, once we've got through the conflict, now we're thinking about, okay, how is the story building towards this climax moment, the major moment in the story? And so for some of you, I think it might be beneficial if you just paused right now and wrote down what do you think the climax actually is? What is the pinnacle point of this story that is the most intense moment, the most frustrating for you probably as a reader? Pause now and try to write down the climax. That will help you get the rising action. Okay, so after you've done the climax, you're going to go into rising action. So you've written down what you think the climax is here. Let's look at what events lead to that climax. So the first one would be Caitlin attending the prep school. That's kind of how we start off. That's how things get going. Caitlin attends a prep school with students that are wealthy, and she lives in the housing projects with her mother after her parents' divorce. So after we kind of learn that happens, the next thing would be Caitlin's mother plants a garden in the neighborhood. Those neighborhood kids take an interest, they start participating. Things seem to be going well for her mother, and at the same time, Caitlin is still dealing with all these internal struggles of living in poverty and what that really means for her. After that, Caitlin refuses to help in her garden. You know, her mom asks her if she wants to get involved. She doesn't really want to get involved. And she becomes more and more resentful as her classmates talk about the welfare queen. They can speak about these matters without being too passionate, and she is experiencing all this anger. So then the climax moment, I hope that you wrote down, was when the agent from the housing authority comes to tell Caitlin's mom that she cannot have the garden, like it's against the rules. So I'm going to let you pause the video now and write down everything in the rising action and everything in the climax. Go. Okay, so now that you have everything from the rising action written down and everything from the climax, we're going to talk about the falling action, the resolution. So falling action, basically after this point where the housing authority comes to tell Caitlin's mom that she cannot have the garden and it's against the rules, what happens after that moment? There's really only like one or two more sections of text at this point. So I want you to read the end of the story, like after the housing authority comes and says she can't have the garden. What happens after that? Go ahead and pause the video, read what happens after that, and then write it in this falling action box. So for the falling action, the agent pours the chemicals on the garden to kill it. You should have found that in your text after the climax. And then Caitlin continues school but acts out by, she continues going to school, but then she's acting out. She destroys the flowers from the flower arrangement at the school. We see that she still has a lot of anger. Okay? And then resolution has been up here the whole time. Now, in class we talked about how this is an unresolved resolution. We don't have that happy ending like we do in Fish Cheeks where the character learns their lesson. So the resolution, you could say the story has an unresolved resolution to show the character's emotions, that emotion of rage, that emotion of anger, and communicate that maybe this issue is still unresolved. So unlike Fish Cheeks, which felt very resolved and kind of positive at the end, Greenidge's text kind of leaves the reader wondering, like, well, what did happen to her? So you can pause now and write down the resolution. All right, and I want you to pause the video one more time. Look at everything from beginning to end. So think about the exposition, all the characters involved, and then that conflict that we had. Caitlin struggling with the changes in her life and the people she goes to school with. And then we get to the resolution. So we know the conflict, we know the beginning, how the story ends. The story has an unresolved resolution, that the character is still angry. Throughout, we saw that even though Caitlin is angry, her mother still finds some joy, like in working in the garden and getting the kids involved. So what can we learn from this text? Because even though it ends up unresolved, I think there's something that happens to the mother that we can kind of learn from. What's the mother's perspective? So pause the video now, and I want you to write in a theme. Okay, a theme for this text could be life can seem harsh and unfair at times. Find something that brings you joy and pushes you forward. So we see through Caitlin that sometimes life truly is unfair. And in the midst of all that unfairness, I like the idea of finding something that can bring you joy, like Caitlin's mother did with the garden. Okay, so at this point, everything that's in red should be written on your paper. If you have something missing, then you need to make sure you pause on this specific screen and get everything down. This is going to help you as we get into our writing.